They left the cowboy for dead, but he returned with mercenaries and loaded guns. Betrayal at Devil's Canyon. Before we start, just a reminder, if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get to the video. The sun hung low over Devil's Canyon, painting the rocky outcroppings in shades of crimson and gold. Marcus Tex Sullivan had ridden these trails for 15 years, first as a ranch hand, then as foreman of the largest cattle operation in 3 counties. His weathered face bore the marks of countless days under the merciless desert sun, and his steady hands had never failed him in a gunfight. But today, those same hands were bound behind his back with rough hemp rope that cut into his wrists. Blood trickled from a gash above his left eye, where Dutch Kellerman's pistol had connected with his skull. The metallic taste in his mouth reminded him that his lip was split, probably from when Jake Morrison's boot had found its mark. "Should have minded your own business, Tex," Dutch sneered, his gold teeth glinting in the fading light. The man's expensive suit looked out of place in the rugged terrain, but the cold to acento hinto in his hand was all too familiar. "Nobody asked you to go poking around the books." Tex spat blood into the dust. "Stealing from widows and orphans ain't something a man just walks away from, Dutch. That pension fund was meant for the families of dead ranch hands, not your gambling debts." Jake Morrison, the ranch owner's spoiled son, laughed nervously. At 25, he had never worked an honest day in his life, preferring to spend his father's money on whiskey and poker games in town. "My father trusted you, Tex. We all did. And this is how you repay us? Threatening to expose our business arrangements? Tex, his voice was horsey but filled with contempt. "You mean theft? Grand larceny. Your daddy built this ranch on honest work, and you're pissing it all away on cards and whores." Dutch backhanded him across the face, the force of the blow nearly knocking Tex from his knees. "Enough talk. We've got a schedule to keep." The third man in their group, a hired gun named Snake Rollins, checked his pocket watch. Snake was a thin, wiry man with dead eyes and a reputation for never missing his target. His real name was Samuel, but nobody had called him that since he'd put 3 bullets in a sheriff's back in Tombstone 5 years ago. "Sun's almost down," Snake observed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We do this now, or we wait till morning." "Now," Dutch decided. He wanted this finished tonight. They had brought Tex to Devil's Canyon for a reason. The rocky gorge was notorious for its treacherous footing and sudden drop-offs. Many a cowboy had met his end here, either thrown from a spooked horse or caught in one of the flash floods that could turn the dry creek bed into a raging torrent in minutes. "Here's what's going to happen, Tex," Dutch explained, pulling out a bottle of whiskey. "You're going to have a little accident. Too much to drink, lost your footing in the dark. Tragic, really. The whole town will mourn the loss of such a dedicated foreman." Tex watched as Dutch poured whiskey over his shirt and into his hair. The smell was overwhelming, and he had to fight not to gag. "You won't get away with this. People will ask questions." "What people?" Jake laughed. "You've got no family, no close friends, just that dead old horse of yours, and we'll take good care of him. Sell him to a nice family with children." The mention of his horse, Thunder, sent a surge of rage through Tex's chest. The black stallion had been his companion for 8 years, saved from a cruel owner who had beaten the animal nearly to death. Tex had nursed Thunder back to health, and the bond between man and horse was unbreakable. "You touch my horse, and you'll what?" Snake interrupted, pressing the barrel of his gun against Tex's temple. "You'll be dead, cowboy. Dead men don't make threats." Dutch stepped back, surveying their work. "Make it look good, Snake. A fire from there should do the trick, but put a bullet in him first. Can't have him surviving the drop and crawling away." As Snake cocked his pistol, Tex closed his eyes and thought of his father, a Texas Ranger who had died fighting Comanche raiders when Tex was just 16. The old man had always said that a man's character was measured not by how he lived, but by how he faced death. The gunshot echoed through the canyon like thunder. But it wasn't Snake's gun that had fired. A rifle bullet took Snake in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his pistol flying into the rocks. From the ridge above, a voice called out in accented English, "Drop your weapons, señores, or the next shot will not be so merciful." Dutch and Jake spun around, their guns drawn, but they couldn't see the shooter in the gathering darkness. "Who's up there?" Dutch shouted. "A friend of justice," came the reply, "and an enemy of cowards who prey on honest men." More shots rang out, kicking up dust around Dutch and Jake's feet. Realizing they were outgunned and exposed, the two men grabbed the wounded Snake and retreated to their horses. "This ain't over, Tex," Dutch yelled as they rode away. "You're a dead man walking." As the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows above. Carlos Mendoza was a former Mexican army officer who had fled north after a revolution had cost him his rank and his family's estate. He worked odd jobs around the territory, but his real calling was helping those who couldn't help themselves. Carlos quickly cut Tex's bonds and helped him to his feet. "Are you badly hurt, amigo?" Tex flexed his wrists, working feeling back into his hands. "I live, thanks to you, but I don't understand, why did you help me?" "I was tracking those men," Carlos explained. "They killed a friend of mine in Tucson last month, a priest who spoke out against their business practices. When I saw them bring you here, I knew they meant to kill you." Tex nodded grimly. "They would have too. Dutch Kelderman and Jake Morrison have been stealing from the ranch's pension fund. I found the evidence, and they decided I knew too much." "What will you do now?" Carlos asked. Tex looked out over the canyon, his jaw set with determination. "They made one mistake, Carlos. They let me live. And now I'm going to make them pay for every dollar they stole, every life they've ruined. You cannot face them alone," Carlos warned. "They have money, influence, hired guns. Then I'll get my own hired guns." Tex replied, "Inhuman good men who've been wronged by people like Dutch and Jake. Men who'll fight for justice if the price is right." Carlos smiled. "In that case, senor, you have your first recruit. I have my own score to settle with these bastardos." As they made their way back to where Carlos had hidden his horse, Tex's mind was already working. He knew exactly where to find the kind of men he needed. Men who had been soldiers, lawmen, or just honest cowboys who had been pushed too far by corrupt ranchers and crooked businessmen. Dutch Kellerman and Jake Morrison thought they had eliminated a threat. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain by bringing them down. The cowboy they had left for dead was very much alive, and he was coming back with friends. 3 weeks had passed since the ambush at Devil's Canyon, and Tex Sullivan was a changed man. Gone was the trusting foreman who had believed in the goodness of his employers. In his place stood a hardened warrior with ice-cold eyes and a heart full of righteous fury. He sat in the back garden of the Broken Wheel saloon in the border town of Perdition, nursing a whiskey and studying the faces of the men around him. This wasn't the kind of establishment that attracted honest cowboys or respectable citizens. The Broken Wheel was where you came when you needed to disappear, or when you needed to find men who specialized in making other people disappear. Carlos Mendoza sat across from him, equally alert and watchful. Over the past 3 weeks, the two men had become close allies, united by their shared desire for justice and their mutual respect for each other's skills. Carlos had proven himself to be not just a crack shot, but a tactical genius who could plan an operation with military precision. "Tell me about the others," Tex said quietly. His eyes never leaving the saloon's entrance, Carlos consulted a small notebook. Miguel Santos, former sergeant in the Mexican army, expert with explosives. His family was murdered by bandits working for a corrupt general. He has been living as a mercenary for 2 years. Can we trust him with our lives? Carlos assured him. Miguel's word is his bond. He hates corruption in all its forms. What about the American, John Iron Mackenzie, former cavalry officer, discharged after he refused to participate in a massacre of peaceful Indians? He has been working as a hired gun, but only takes jobs that align with his moral code. He is expensive, but worth every penny. Tex nodded. And the other? Tommy Nakamura, half Japanese, half Irish. His father was a samurai who came to America and married an Irish immigrant. Tommy combines the best of both traditions, the discipline and honor of the samurai with the fighting spirit of the Irish. He is young, but deadly with both sword and gun. Sounds like quite a collection, Tex observed. There is one more, Carlos continued. A woman, goes by the name Black Rose. Nobody knows her real name or where she comes from, but she is said to be the finest tracker and scout in the territory. Some say she was raised by Apache. Others claim she is a former Pinkerton agent. All agree that she can kill a man at 500 yards with a rifle, or slip a knife between his ribs without making a sound. Tex raised an eyebrow. A woman? Do not let that fool you, amigo. I have seen her work. She is more dangerous than any 3 men in this room. As if summoned by their conversation, the saloon doors swung open and 5 figures entered. Tex immediately recognized them from Carlos's descriptions, though seeing them in person was still impressive. Miguel Santos was a stocky man in his 40s, with graying hair and hands that bore the scars of handling explosives. His dark eyes held the weight of too much loss, but his bearing was that of a professional soldier. John McKinney was tall and lean, with the ramrod straight posture of a career military man. His blonde hair was going gray at the temples, and a jagged scar ran from his left ear to his jaw, a souvenir from his last cavalry engagement. Tommy Nakamura was younger than the others, perhaps 25, with the compact build of a natural athlete. He wore his black hair in a traditional top knot, and 2 swords hung at his side in the ancient style of his father's people. The 4th man was a surprise, a massive African-American, with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen too many fights. Carlos hadn't mentioned him, but it was the 5th member of the group that truly caught Tex's attention. Black Rose was not what he had expected. She was tall for a woman, perhaps 5'8", with long black hair braided with feathers and beads in the Apache style. Her skin was bronzed by the sun, and her green eyes held an intelligence that missed nothing. She wore men's clothing, leather pants, boots, and a dark shirt, but there was no mistaking her femininity. The group approached Tex and Carlos's table, and Mackenzie spoke first. You Sullivan? I am. Carlos here says you've got a job that needs doing. Something about corrupt ranchers and stolen money. Tex has stood for them to see it. That's right. But before we go any further, I need to know, are you all willing to work for something other than money? The big African-American laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Mister, I ain't worked for money in 5 years. Name's Moses Washington, and I work for justice. Used to be a slave, then a soldier in the 54th of Massachusetts, then fighting for what's right ever since. Black Rosa spoke for the first time, her voice soft but carrying an edge of steel. My people were driven from their lands by men like the ones you hunt. I do not need money, I need vengeance. Tommy Nakamura bowed slightly. My father taught me that a warrior's greatest honor comes from protecting the innocent. If your cause is just, you have my sword. Miguel Santos simply nodded. Carlos has told me of these men. They are parasites who feed on the suffering of others. I will help you destroy them. Mackenzie was the last to speak. I've been fighting corruption my whole life, Sullivan. Lost my career, my pension, my reputation, all because I wouldn't look the other way when powerful men did evil things. If you're really going after Dutch Kellerman and his cronies, then you've got my gun. Tex looked around the table at these unlikely allies. Good, because what I'm planning isn't just about getting revenge. It's about sending a message to every corrupt rancher, crooked businessman, and bought and paid for lawman in the territory. We're going to hit them where it hurts, their money, their reputation, and their sense of security. What exactly are you proposing? Black Rose asked. Tex pulled out a hand-drawn map and spread it on the table. Dutch Kellerman has been using the Morrison Ranch as a front for a much larger operation. He's been stealing from pension funds, skimming profits from cattle sales, and using hired guns to intimidate anyone who gets too close to the truth. But his real money comes from something else, gun running. The group leaned in closer as Tex pointed to various locations on the map. He's been buying surplus military weapons and selling them to the highest bidder, Apache war parties, Mexican revolutionaries, Alto gangs. The profits are enormous, and he's been using them to buy judges, sheriffs, and politicians. How do you know all this? Mackenzie asked. Because I've been investigating for 3 weeks, Tex replied. After they tried to kill me, I started following the money trail. Dutch has been sloppy, too confident that nobody would dare challenge him. Carlos pointed to a spot on the map. This is his main warehouse, just outside of Copper Creek. He stores the weapons there before shipping them out. That's our first target. Tex confirmed. We hit the warehouse, destroy his inventory, and take his ledgers. Those books will have the names of every corrupt official he's been paying off. And then, Moses asked, then we start working our way up the chain, Tex said grimly. Dutch, Jake Morrison, and every man who's been helping them steal from honest folks. We're going to take them down, one by one, until there's nobody left to protect their operation. Black Rose studied the map carefully. This warehouse, it will be heavily guarded. 6 men, according to my sources, Tex confirmed. But they're not expecting trouble. Dutch thinks I'm dead, remember. When do we move? Tommy asked, his hand unconsciously moving to the hilt of his sword. Tomorrow night, Tex decided. New moon, good cover. We go in fast and hard. Take what we need and get out before anyone knows we were there. Miguel Santos smiled for the first time since entering the saloon. I like this plan. It has been too long since I have blown something up. As the group began discussing the details of their assault, Tex felt a grim satisfaction sitting over him. Dutch Kellerman and Jake Morrison had made a fatal error when they tried to kill him. They had awakened something dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The cowboy they had left for dead was about to become their worst nightmare. The warehouse sat like a dark fortress against the star-filled sky, its corrugated metal walls reflecting the pale moonlight. Tex Sullivan crouched behind a pile of shipping crates, his heart steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Beside him, his 5 companions checked their weapons. One final time. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Miguel Santos would create a diversion with explosives at the rear of the building, drawing the guards away from the main entrance. While they were distracted, Black Rose and Tommy Nakamura would eliminate the sentries with silent precision. Mackenzie and Moses would secure the perimeter, while Tex and Carlos went inside to retrieve the ledgers and gather evidence of Dutch's gun-running operation. Remember, Tex whispered, we're not just here for revenge. We need those books intact. Without them, we can't prove the corruption goes all the way to the territorial capital. Black Rose materialized beside him like a shadow, her movements so quiet that even Tex, who had been expecting her, was startled. 2 guards at the front gate, 3 more patrolling the perimeter. The 6th is inside, probably sleeping. Positions, Tex ordered. The team moved with the precision of a military unit, each member knowing their role perfectly. Miguel disappeared around the back of the building, while Black Rose and Tommy began their deadly dance with the sentries. Tex watched through field glasses as Black Rose approached the first guard. The man never saw her coming. One moment, he was lighting a cigarette. The next, he was slumping to the ground with her knife between his ribs. Tommy took the second guard with equal efficiency, his katana sliding between the man's ribs and into his heart before he could cry out. The third guard was more alert, turning at the last second as Tommy approached. But the young samurai was ready, his blade singing through the air to open the man's throat in a single fluid motion. Clear, came Black Rose's whispered signal. Miguel's explosion lit up the night sky, a thunderous blast that shook the ground and sent flames shooting into the darkness. As planned, the remaining guards rushed toward the source of the destruction, leaving the front of the warehouse undefended. Tex and Carlos moved swiftly through the main entrance, their guns drawn and ready. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of wooden crates and canvas-covered shapes that could only be weapons, rifles, pistols, ammunition, enough firepower to arm a small army. There, Carlos pointed to a small office built into one corner of the warehouse. The ledgers will be in there. They found the books exactly where Tex had hoped, locked in a safe behind a painting of a naked woman. Carlos made a quick work of the lock with a set of picks, and soon they were loading the incriminating documents into a leather satchel. Jesus, Tex breathed as he flipped through one of the ledgers. Look at these names, Carlos. Judges, sheriffs, territorial legislatores. Dutch has been buying them all. How much money are we talking about? Carlos asked. Tex did a quick calculation. Over the past 2 years, close to $100,000, maybe more. A gunshot from outside interrupted their examination of the evidence. Then another, followed by the distinctive crack of Tommy's rifle. Time to go, Carlos said urgently. They grabbed the satchel and headed for the door, but found their way blocked by a familiar figure. Dutch Kelderman stood in the warehouse entrance, a smoking pistol in his hand and a smile of pure malice on his face. Well, well, Dutch said. The dead cowboy rises. I have to admit, Tex, I'm impressed. When Jake told me someone had hit the warehouse, I knew it had to be you. Nobody else would be stupid enough to try something like this. Where are my people? Tex demanded, his own gun trained on Dutch's chest. Your mercenaries? Oh, they're keeping my boys busy outside. But don't worry, this will all be over soon. Mormon appeared behind Dutch, at least a dozen hired guns with rifles and shotguns. Tex realized they had walked into a trap. You see, Tex, I've been expecting you, Dutch continued. Did you really think I wouldn't notice when you started asking questions around town? When you started recruiting killers and thieves? I've been watching you for weeks. Then you know why I'm here, Tex said grimly. Oh, I know exactly why you're here. You want to play hero, expose my business arrangements, maybe get some revenge for that little misunderstanding at Devil's Canyon. But here's the thing, Tex. Heroes don't win in the real world. Money wins, power wins, and I have both. The standoff was broken by an explosion that dwarfed Miguel's earlier diversion. The entire back wall of the warehouse disappeared in a ball of flame and flying debris, and through the smoke came Moses Washington, his massive frame silhouetted against the fire as he charged forward with a shotgun in each hand. The big man's war cry filled the air as he opened fire, his twin shotguns cutting down 3 of Dutch's men before they could react. Behind him came Mackenzie and Tommy, their rifles barking death as they advanced through the chaos. Dutch spun to face this new threat, giving Tex the opening he needed. His Colt .45 spoke once, the bullet taking Dutch in the shoulder and spinning him around. The corrupt businessman's pistol flew from his hand, clattering across the warehouse floor. Carlos, Tex shouted, tossing him the satchel. Get those books out of here. The Mexican soldier caught the bag and disappeared into the smoke, while Tex advanced on the wounded Dutch. Around them the battle raged as his companions fought their way through Dutch's hired guns. "It's over, Dutch," Tex said, his gun trained on the man's heart. "Your running days are finished." Dutch laughed, blood running down his arm from the bullet wound. "You think killing me will change anything? I'm just one man, Tex. There are a dozen others ready to take my place." "Maybe," Tex admitted, "but they'll think twice before they try to steal from widows and orphans." "You self-righteous bastard," Dutch snarled. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The people I work for, they'll hunt you down like a dog. They'll kill everyone you've ever cared about." "Then I guess I'll have to kill them first," Tex replied. The gunshot echoed through the burning warehouse, and Dutch Kelman's reign of corruption came to an end. Outside, the battle was winding down. Moses had accounted for half of Dutch's men by himself, his shotgun speaking with deadly authority. Mackenzie's military training had served him well, his precise rifle fire picking off targets with methodical efficiency. Tommy moved like a dancer, his katana flashing in the firelight, as he cut down anyone foolish enough to come within reach. Black Rose appeared at Tex's side, as if by magic. "The perimeter is secure. Miguel is setting charges to destroy the weapons. Any casualties on our side?" "Mackenzie took a bullet in the leg, but he'll leave. The rest of us are fine." Tex nodded, looking around at the destruction. "Good. Let's get out of here before the local law shows up." As they regrouped outside the burning warehouse, Carlos handed Tex the satchel containing Dutch's ledgers. "What now, amigo?" Tex looked at his companions, these unlikely allies who had risked their lives to help him seek justice. "Now we finish what we started. These books contain enough evidence to bring down every corrupt official in the territory. We're going to make sure they all pay for what they've done." "And Jake Morrison?" Black Rose asked. Tex's expression hardened. "Jake's next, but first, we need to get these ledgers to someone who can use them. Someone honest." "I know such a man," Mackenzie said, wincing as Moses helped him walk. "Federal Marshal James Butler. He's been trying to clean up corruption in this territory for years. These books will give him everything he needs." As they rode away from the burning warehouse, Tex felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced since before the ambush at Devil's Canyon. Dutch Kellerman was dead, his gun-running operation destroyed. The evidence of his corruption was safely in their hands. But their work wasn't finished. Jake Morrison was still alive, still stealing from the ranch's pension fund, still living off the suffering of honest working people. And according to the ledgers, he was just one part of a much larger network of corruption that stretched all the way to the territorial capital. The cowboy they had left for dead had returned with mercenaries and loaded guns, just as he had promised. But more than that, he had returned with something even more dangerous, the truth. And in the end, the truth was the most powerful weapon of all. 3 months later, Tex Sullivan stood on the steps of the territorial courthouse, watching as Jake Morrison was led away in shackles. The young man's trial had been swift and decisive, the evidence from Dutch's ledgers proving his guilt beyond any doubt. Federal Marshal Butler had been as honest as Mackenzie had promised, using the information to launch a territory-wide investigation that had resulted in dozens of arrests. Corrupt judges had been removed from the bench, crooked sheriffs had been stripped of their badges, and politicians who had sold their votes to the highest bidder had been exposed and disgraced. The Morrison Ranch had been sold to pay restitution to the families who had been cheated out of their pension funds. Tex had used his share of the reward money to buy a small spread of his own, where he planned to raise horses and live quietly. His companions had gone their separate ways, but they remained in touch. Carlos had returned to Mexico to fight in the revolution, armed with weapons purchased with his reward money. Miguel had opened a mining operation in Colorado, using his expertise with explosives for more peaceful purposes. Mackenzie had accepted a position as a federal marshal, continuing his fight against corruption from within the system. Tommy had surprised everyone by opening a martial arts school in San Francisco, teaching the ancient ways of the samurai to a new generation of Americans. Moses had used this money to buy land in Kansas, where he was building a community for freed slaves and their families. Black Rose had simply vanished one day, leaving behind only a note that said she had found peace and was returning to her people. Tex suspected he would never see her again, but he hoped she had found the closure she had been seeking. As for Tex himself, he had learned that revenge was a dish best served with justice. The men who had tried to kill him were dead or in prison. Their victims had been compensated, and the territory was a little bit cleaner because of their efforts. He mounted his horse, Thunder, who had been waiting faithfully for his return, and rode toward his new ranch. Behind him, the courthouse bells were ringing, celebrating another victory for law and order in a land that had seen too little of both. The cowboy they had left for dead had not only survived, he had triumphed, and in doing so, he had proven that sometimes when good men stand together against corruption and evil, justice can prevail. The sun was setting over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a beautiful end to a long and difficult journey, and Tex Sullivan rode it toward his future with a clear conscience and a peaceful heart.